Welcome back, everybody, to the Thrive in Wabash County podcast. That is our second take of our intro tonight because our guest was fixing her face ahead of the episode. If you've tuned in to some of our more recent episodes, we have spent the time in the studio together with each of us as co-hosts, rotating the hot seat. And if you've listened, you've heard an episode from Adam Stakeman and I both in the hot seat, which leaves one of us left. Our fearless leader, Christine Flohr, is in the hot seat this evening. So we're really excited to dive in. There's, I'm sure, not a single listener that doesn't know Christine, but we're going to go a few levels deeper tonight. And for those people in the community that may not have had the opportunity to work with you on something or attend an event that your organization is responsible for, get to learn a little bit more about what makes you tick, and you as a leader that spanned over many decades now, not to age you on the podcast.
Barely just aged many decades.
But in Wabash County. So excited to be here with both of you tonight. Adam, anything that our listeners should know before we dive in here with our time with Christine?
Well, I will just say, if they haven't personally met Christine, I am certain that they've all been affected by Christine and her work at Visit Wabash County, or before that at other organizations you've been employed at. In one way or another, you've probably impacted every single citizen in this county and visitors. It's like, so they've either seen your work or they've met you in person. So I think this is going to be exciting to kind of reveal Christine Flohr to our audience.
Overly kind and generous. Thank you for that.
Okay, here we go. All right, we're going to have that, if anybody knows Christine, right throughout the episode. One thing that I'm really excited to talk about, and we'll make sure we get into kind of what makes you tick, your background, all those ways that we typically start an episode. But I think a common theme our listeners may know, if they know Christine or through listening to this podcast, is truly how I met Christine for the very first time through leading the Imagine 185 work. Went and met with Christine, right? And we're walking through the different initiatives, many of which she was already well underway with her team, right? But those that she wasn't or hasn't been since on any of the initiatives that we've worked on, just continuously saying yes and leaning in, and not from a standpoint of flippantly, right? But very strategically. And if she's in, she's 2 feet in, right? And going to make sure that it's done right. Extremely well organized, right? Down to the studio, our notes all throughout the studio, our processes, right? Everybody knows that about her. But Christine, I think that's one thing that I appreciate most about you and that many have benefited from in Wabash County, this podcast being a product of you just continuing to lean in to the momentum and the success that Wabash County's seen before your time, but most definitely in the last several years and in your leadership at Visit Wabash County.
I'll second that. Her ability to say yes intentionally, thoughtfully to programs and partnerships.
Right. Yep.
Because, Christine, when you and I go back to when we really first started working together, I was a board member at Visit Wabash County, and we were looking to hire a new executive director, and we brought you on board. And I think back to what Visit Wabash County was then. Graciously, we had a room at the county museum. I jokingly,
for our listeners, a room.
I jokingly call it a closet, but it was a room. And to see what that organization looks like now, a little over 14 years later, and the programs that you've implemented, including the podcast, Dam to Dam, Run the River. We now own a trolley. You're managing a countywide cleanup. Every opportunity that you think that is going to benefit not just Visit Wabash County, but this county in general, or another organization, you step into it, like Alex said, with both feet. And that's part of what I want to get into today is how do you determine and how are you so open-minded to new ideas and new concepts? There aren't many visitors centers in the state or in the county that are running a 5K, 10K half marathon, doing a townwide cleanup, or a 100-mile bike ride. Those are typically outside of the scope of a visitor center. How did you find yourself in that role and saying yes to all these opportunities?
And before you answer that, I'll even give you a little bit more time to maybe ponder that answer. This is great, Adam. We're truly co-driving the episode tonight because you were going exactly where I was going. For our listeners, after you listen to this, do some research, right? Check out other convention and visitors bureaus in the state of Indiana with 50,000 or less people, right? Wabash County is around 30,000. So if you want to get even more specific, and work to find an organization. Adam, you rattled off the event sign, the outdoor adventure series, the experiences, all that they're doing, right? The trolley,
Bluegrass,
all of these experiences. But let's not forget that this is still an organization that has a podcast, right, that they help oversee, and it's a collaborative partnership, right? We're talking about partnerships. The Wabash County Fellowship Program is, yes, a program of Imagine 185 that came out, and the Community Foundation has a staff person with the Imagine 185 board that implements it. But when we need marketing for that program, its very first year when we had little to no resource, Christine and her team step up to make sure that we can carry out that program. Had some resources come year two, and she says yes to a fee-for-service contract to help diversify her organization's revenue a little bit, to be hired as the marketing partner for the program, right? And so little things, big things, and everywhere in between identify a convention visitors bureau the size of ours and a county the size of ours that's doing what ours is doing, right? For our listeners, I truly don't mean that biased-wise about Wabash County. That's the organization that we have here within the community, right? But back to Adam's question, sorry to get us off track or go a step further, but where does that yes come from? And how do you evaluate, screen those opportunities, which you ultimately still have to take back to your stakeholders and your board of directors before making those decisions?
I would say that the legacy that comes before us, and we've talked about that in this room, have taught us that that is how you grow and develop and thrive in a community. And it's those people who came before us that set the tone, the Mark Honeywells, the Richard Fords, the Haldermans. I mean, the list of family stakeholders that continue just to pour back into Wabash over the years and didn't have to, kind of set the standard of that's just our culture here. And then you see that ripple into the leadership that I have from my board of directors. And so anything that you see that Visit Wabash County is doing well is at the hand of that leadership. And I'm honored to work under their governance and under their guidance and under their trust. And so as we have developed over the last 14 years since I've been in the role, it's not been about me per se. It has been about surrounding yourself. We've talked about this. You both have shared this. It's surrounding yourself with people who want to dream big to be big, can help execute a large-scale vision, and then work alongside you to make it happen. None of those wonderful things that the office at Visit Wabash County is accomplishing is something that we're doing at all on our own. And that is at the hands of really thoughtful leaders that sit around that board table once a month and discuss what do we need to do to be the best, to serve the best, and to be long-term sustainable, to make sure that we're creating the greatest impact. And so what makes me say the yes isn't an I decision. A lot of the times I'll process ideas or information that we've received from a stakeholder. You know, Dam to Dam came to us because Parker Beecham had seen an opportunity for our community to leverage an event that was already taking place organically, which was Bill Rowe's Dam to Dam birthday ride, and so then we chose to evaluate how could that impact the greater good, and then took it on. So really it's making sure that the work that we do is going to generate impact for the stakeholders who live here, and that if we're going to lean in and do it, we are going to do it well. And we're going to make sure that if we continue to execute those programs and events, that there are budgets and operating procedures. So we're constantly looking at ways to reevaluate and redefine it and to make it better and stronger and sharper going forward. I don't know if that answered that for you or not, but
Very humbly, per usual.
but true, but very true. I mean that.
But I've sat on your board, and I know the board that I've always sat on, there are members come and go, and you're right, they're community leaders, they buy in, but you're the one day to day that's executing, overseeing the staff that you've now built at Visit Wabash County. But when those ideas first come to you, a traditional visitors executive director could say, no, that's not in our scope of work really quickly. But that's not the way you approach it. You're going to make people feel like they're being heard, and that ultimately you may come back to them and say, hey, this doesn't fit, right, but this is another route that you could take. But you just sit down and you pour the time into those stakeholders and those people that have ideas. It's just like the March cleanup that we're currently under. You could have very easily sat down and just said, this falls outside of our scope of work, but I think this other organization could do it for you. And it didn't. You just wrapped your arms around it and said, I think this is going to fit in what we're doing. So,
yeah. And I would say too, Christine, your board has that confidence. The board of leaders, right? I know your board now and in the past, board members are incredibly strong, right?
Yeah.
All of that, I agree with you. But that confidence in them to say yes or no or provide feedback on a decision is only possible because of their confidence in you as the leader of the organization and your team, right? That you're coming with.
True.
And those details and processes that you have in place and you develop ahead of time before bringing it to them is why you've seen the sustainable growth that you've seen as an organization and being able to expand what all you guys are capable of doing, right? And are executing at a high level.
I would agree with that. There's, you sit around, you talk about us having, when the Wabash County Museum opened, they allowed for space with rent-free for, at the time, the Wabash County Convention and Visitors Bureau to have an office space there. And it made sense for the time, but we got to a point where we had to make a decision. And in my mind, I'm thinking, we can operate business as usual, which a lot of the acronym is CVB, Convention Visitors Bureau, how they operate, which is they wait for the phone to ring or they target tour bus operators, right? The big wins. Or we could be another investment into our community as a place that's also a destination. And the museum itself was already a destination. The way that we had our office laid out, it really was a desk, a copy machine, and 2 acrylic wall-hanging magazine rack holders. And we had so many rich assets that we could do a better job of telling that story and marketing it. And so I did. I went to the board at the time and I said, I think we need to have a welcome center. And I didn't want to call it a visitor center because I didn't want it to isolate a certain target audience. I wanted it to be welcoming to those who already live here, thinking of moving here and or are visiting here. And so I think that was probably the first large investment step we took, other than changing our name to something that resonated with what our mission and our heart was, which changing it, our DBA is Visit Wabash County, which later now you see almost all the convention and visitors bureaus have turned to, visit X county or explore this city. So we kind of led the charge in that a decade or so ago.
Thank you for bailing Adam and I out with the CVB acronym so that we didn't continue to trip over Convention and Visitors Bureau. That's extremely helpful.
BWC now,
per
Visit
usual,
Wabash County.
You've got us covered. Christine, talk a little bit about, I want to talk more about the Welcome Center and what that space looks like for somebody that hasn't been there yet. That's important. But you've mentioned your team several times, as you always do, right?
Yeah.
Which has obviously grown since you were a desk in a closet.
Yeah.
And so maybe walk our listeners through, not just from the standpoint of who those people are and what they do today. I think that's important that the listener knows, but also just what that process was like as a leader growing from a closet with a desk to now of having a staff and a team, and how you made those decisions along the way also.
Yes, when the board hired me, they had already had a part-time shared professional who worked a portion of her time with the museum and then the other balance of her time with Visit Wabash County. And that was helpful because when one of you needed to be out of the office and meeting or in partnership meetings, you had someone there that could man and answer the phone and those kind of things. But when we moved to our new location, it was about the same time that we started to plan what a revenue stream could look like, which then became the Dam to Dam. And that was the first large-scale event, or in addition to opening a welcome center and stocking it with quality retail merchandise. That became another partnership and a way to showcase our business and artisans throughout Wabash County. And so it was a lot of hustle. I love to work. I love my work. I love to get up every single day and show up for the people who live here, for the people I want to live here, and my team. And there were a lot of 60, 70, 80-hour work weeks for the first couple years in this role, not because my board expected it from me, but that's what it took to build. And I didn't mind it. I don't begrudge it. I'm grateful that I had the stamina. I was a lot younger. I was grateful to have a supportive husband who saw the vision that we were trying to accomplish. And then after that, it just became coordinated growth that we could manage and do well. And so the original part-time employee that I got to work with, her name was Jill Ross. She took another role and I had a vacancy, and Jennifer Long Dillon applied for the position, and she joined our team as part-time, and she remains actually still part-time. And Jennifer and I together, our office was always open, so we worked through lunch. We took turns working Saturdays. And then together, she and I helped build some of that initial programming. She developed ideas like the foodie walking tours, where we would take people around and talk about the historic architecture, and they would stop in restaurants in downtown Wabash, or we used to do them in North Manchester, and they would eat and sip and savor along the way. And so Jennifer and I have worked together for over 12 years. She's been at Visit Wabash County. And as revenue streams grew, we recognized that at Visit Wabash County, we had another choice. We could continue to operate at status quo, which is having a really nice, and it's beautiful, the Welcome Center. If we have time to get back to that, the credit to the vision of that goes back to Michael Beecham and his generosity and the people that I got to work with, because we got to build that out. But as we were building capacity and diversifying our revenue, the gap was we didn't have that dedicated marketing arm to help us reach larger target markets, So, and also when I stepped into this role, what we now have is an 84-page Destination Wabash County guide was a trifold pamphlet talking about these incredible assets, and it just didn't do us justice. And our website was not where it needed to be. So we did some foundational building pieces, early on too. And as we recognized that we needed actually support, and we looked to other organizations in the community tourism is a version of economic development. It's just another arm and branch of that. And we saw how the city and the county were supporting other great organizations through some funding support who were working on their part of economic development. And so the board of directors really helped guide the conversation so that we could get some additional support funding from the county commissioners and the city. And so that really helped us then be able to add staff. And then it's just been a balance. It's kind of, as we built staff, we were able to do more. And as we continue to do more, we needed a little bit more support. And so I think we're operating at full capacity right now with staffing. There's myself, and then Jennifer Long Dillon. She is our tourism manager. She's been there for over 12 years. Stephanie Rogers, she has been there going on 5. Biz Bishop, she's been there over 3, going on. She might actually be in her 4th year now that I think about it. Yeah, she's in her 4th year. And Brittany Reiner, she's getting ready to complete her 3rd year. So it's a really incredibly talented team. And any of the work that you see produced out of that office is at their hands. They are bright and hardworking, and they care, and they're so diligent. Every piece, every part that they touch and they execute is with a level of service that goes above and beyond. And if you ever look at our year in review report, it's impressive what is accomplished out of our office.
Thank you for sharing that.
That was
There's
long.
a lot to No. That's great. We're gonna go even a step deeper.
Yeah.
And I have seen you lead in a way that is unique within our community, and we're so grateful for it in terms of you talk about the level of service and all of the things that your team does. And that is a true reflection of your leadership from the top all the way through the organization in terms of not only the work ethic and those kind of values, but when I've came to you to work on a project with you and you're coming on board as a partner, you produce the same level of planning, budgets, timelines, execution, all of that to come back to present to me with the same way that when your team has an idea, they put those things together before you'll sign off to take it to your board. And so I think that's a really good example. The other thing that I value is that paid, unpaid partnerships, somebody from the community comes to you, whether it's an organization, a business, what have you, comes to you and says, hey, we're trying to do X. I have seen you, if it's not a revenue generation to the organization or doesn't fit because you know your team's at capacity, to take your own time on the weekends and the evenings and prepare at that same level as you would if it was anything that you do with the organization, right? And not just sending that person a resource, but truly in the trenches with that person, developing a solution to move forward with. it would be really easy to just connect them to something else or a free resource, but truly getting in the trench with them is a value that's all the way down your team, and getting to work alongside each of your team members in a variety of capacities that bleeds through. Sorry to talk so much, Adam. It's just you made me drive, so I'm going to take advantage of driving tonight. But Christine, a step deeper for our listeners.
Yeah.
Somebody on your team says, I have an idea to do X. Where does it go from there?
The first thing I ask them to do is write a plan and a budget, high level, so we can process what that looks like and where it fits into our areas of focus. And then the other
Before
thing,
you move from that, high level, people get budget, right? Just you want
Yeah.
a rough idea of probably revenue expense.
yeah,
Talk about when you say a high level plan
Yeah.
for what they want to do, what's incorporated in that? What does that look like?
when we write a plan, the first thing we recognize is what's the ROI, what's the win, right? What are we filling that's missing? And then the other part that comes along with it is what partners can we highlight? And then do we have the capacity to execute it? So I am constantly, my team, they want to do so much in such a great way that sometimes I have to remind them that we either refine or remove, right? So if an event or a program needs to sit on the shelf for a couple of years and then we bring it back, that's okay. But they get so excited to do some really incredible pieces of work and experiences that's going to drive what we need. And so by having them walk through who's it going to attract, what does it fill, what does it meet, and then where are we with capacity? After we can see that, yes, it is something we can take on, or it needs to replace something, or it needs to wait a year and come back in, then we rally around it and do the detail piece of it. Because all of our team members aren't doing just one thing at one time. We talk about it either spinning plates, or we talk about you've got a stovetop going and you've got 3 pots, right? And so you talk about all these plates spinning that you have to keep spinning and progressing. And it's not just our programs and events that we're responsible for. It's also telling the story of Wabash County outwardly. That's our core. Our core is to market Wabash County not only as a destination, but a place that you can invest in or call home. And so while we're promoting the events that drive those results, we are also responsible for making sure we're uplifting and highlighting the assets that we have here and that are available to people in Wabash County. And so it's a constant walk with my team of evaluating what we are doing, making sure we don't miss the mark on what we're supposed to be doing, and then what does the direction look like?
Clear mission, clear purpose, right?
Always.
At the forefront,
Always.
feeding up.
Yeah, I think this is a great time to let's talk a little bit about Visit Wabash County. Traditionally, and this goes back prior to you being with Visit Wabash County.
Yeah.
Heads in beds. That was the phrase, and that's how the organization brought money in, right?
Yeah.
You bring people to the community in one way or the other. They sleep in a hotel. Back then, we didn't have the Airbnbs. There's a small tax that's paid, and then our organization will get that money. And so you or our organization, we were trying to get people to come here and stay here in a hotel, and that's what funded us. If I look now at Visit Wabash County, that income stream has diversified to, I don't know, 20 different opportunities that are coming in from dam to dam, Run the River, Bluegrass, all the ones that we've mentioned. But when I look at those as outside of the norm of a VWC, but what you do is partner with the community. So it's a trolley tour that you're hoping is going to bring people to our community. That's an overall win for our community. Hopefully you're making a little bit of money off of it as well, but you're also then partnering with the Speakeasy or, another restaurant.
Bailey's and Rowan.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so
Isaac Walton.
you've check the box. And because I've been as close as I have been to the organization, that pre-planning that you require of your team to say, let's put a plan together. I know that those are all part of that. And the fact that you guys are putting that much thought and detail into it, even down to who's going to lead the trolley tour, what partner, what advertiser can we bring in, that this is a passion of theirs, that fits their mission. You guys think through all of that. The team that you've put together there, and it's changed over the years.
Sure.
People move on to bigger aspirations, but they all buy into the same idea that you have. And that is you being able to I think, see that when you bring somebody in to interview them, but then also to kind of coach them up. And you've built that environment at Visit Wabash County. Talk a little bit about that process and how you get your team members to kind of buy in and to have ownership into the programs that they're operating.
They're smarter than I am, just to be honest. When I don't always understand, or necessarily what they're building doesn't always speak specifically to me, but I encourage, especially the experiences team, which tends to be Stephanie and Jennifer, I encourage them to dream what that needs to look like, whatever they're building. And Stephanie focuses on adventure series and stocking the Welcome Center. Jennifer is trolley tours and private trolley experiences and custom tours. And so for me, I want them to dream as big as they want to dream. But they know to come to me to kind of check in. Let's just check in to make sure that it is within our area of focus and our scope of work and it makes sense. And then they go back out and then they build it. I think over the years, I have been so blessed to have people who have seen the potential in me and take risk in me to lead or to be a part of something that I'm reciprocating that back. And we're going to make mistakes. And I've made mistakes. My team have made mistakes. But it's in those mistakes that we grow and we develop and we are able to redefine or reimagine what tourism can be and what visitors can experience here. I just try to make sure that, and I also want to make sure people feel comfortable and safe. My leadership style is one centered in that faith leadership where I want to make sure we're producing good fruits. And so that safety, that security, and when I hire, I review those pieces with prospect employees. This is a safe environment. I want you to walk in here and I want you to know that you're supported. I want you to know that I don't believe in the phrase, it's not personal, it's professional. Everything's personal. We're people. It's going to affect a person personally, even if it's a professional reason. And so to see people and to recognize their humanness, we're designed to be in good relationship and to be in relationship with one another. And so I want my team to feel safe, come to me with whatever's on their mind, questions, concerns, worries, red flags, excitement. I mean, I've heard some wild ideas come out of Stephanie that we've had to process kind of down together, and Jennifer. But at the end of the day, it's ensuring that they have a safe space to share what they're thinking and dreaming. And the more you cultivate that within your team, the more energized they stay. You box them in, and then they start to feel stifled, and we get to benefit from the fruits of their efforts. We get to know, and sometimes the work that team does isn't as necessarily recognized that it came from them, and that's okay because the impact is still there, right?
Yeah. One thing I appreciate about your leadership style and working with you on projects is no different than what the process you walk through with your team when they do have that idea. You're not squashing that idea, but that additional due diligence at first, and then by the time, if it is something you adopt or execute, or if it's on the shelf for later, just going through that process of innovation, iteration. If it's, I often am with you sometimes saying, if it's the right thing, right, for the organization, if it's the right thing for Wabash County, the money will come for it, right? Or it'll be able to be executed if it's the right thing for your organization and your team, right, that they're trying to move forward. But that just culture of creativity and leaning in is again just something top to bottom that is a long way from a shelf with rack cards on it and a desk in a room, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I was thinking as you were talking about that, giving them space. This is a quick example of what it can be like. So I will get a message from Jennifer on the weekend, and it's a picture of all of these people sitting in a creek barefoot, being served a meal. She will send me, I want to do this. And my response will be, we must talk. And and she'll say, you need to hear me out. And so the balance there is she can see the potential in something that I sometimes can't imagine people wanting to experience. And then we meet in the middle, which is I run through all the liability and the risk and without stopping her from dreaming. And what started as something she saw somewhere taking place and it inspired her to let's talk to what ended up being, Creekside dinner at Avenue Falls, which ended up being a tremendous event. We did not seat our guests in the creek. However, it was a beautiful event that was very intimate and very well done, China plates, and it was a seafood boil. But that's an example of how we balance things out, right? And then once we agreed that people weren't going to be served in seating in the water. I mean, I think some of the guests would have loved it. The liability there, I could see Matt Chittick, our insurance guy, being like, I don't know about this. Then they start those plans, right? And then we start working with marketing on what that brand can look like to tell that story. And that experience was unique and it was wonderful. And we did it once. And, now she'll look at something else that might replace that experience too.
That diversified income stream that we talked about, that's super smart, I think, for any organization to not just be pigeonholed. So you've got multiple income, and in your industry, some of those, the idea of heads in beds, some of that is out of your control. There's a macro level economics that people aren't going to travel, or the trend to travel internationally or small communities, that's going to ebb and flow. So you've got this diversified income stream, and which has suited your organization really well. Mm-hmm. And I think back to when COVID happened, and your team had to really pivot, take a deep breath, and say, okay, how can we best serve the community? And you did that in a multitude of ways. People weren't traveling; they weren't getting on airplanes, so you almost did a multi-focused. Where how are we going to provide an education and a way for our current residents to get out and explore the community in a way that they haven't? I want you to talk a little bit about that. Okay. But then you also saw a need from your downtown businesses that they were also like almost panic, right? Like, we don't have people walking in our shops anymore. What can we do? And your team, in your guidance, you started to teach and educate and show people, if they didn't have a website, how do they build a website? How can they sell their wares online to an audience that's not going to travel anymore? So talk to me a little bit about both of those ideas and what that's like as a leader to pivot an organization, not completely away from your mission, but just in a different direction.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start back at the board level again. A lot of tourism offices closed, and then they downsized staff, right? So they reduced staff and they just stopped working, right? And because the Visit Wabash County Board of Directors is very strategic to make sure that they have that operating reserve in case something happens, a revenue stream is affected, that we can protect our biggest asset within the organization, and that is the people doing the work. So first, credit goes to the board, who was already prepared for what you can't be prepared for, right? You don't know when a COVID is going to hit. And I can remember it was this time when, we went out to eat for Brooks's birthday on, early March. And in a week, the world had closed and people were at home. And so the board we were working from home, and the board never asked us one time, never cut our payroll, never asked me, who could you live without? Who can we cut? And so that's first a credit to great leadership from the board of directors. Then the other was we would meet and we would have these Zoom check-ins. Now, I will say from where we were on day one, toward the end, I was starting to worry about some of my team. They were looking like sweatpants were their only option in life. I think maybe we all got to that point. But the team at the time did look a little bit different, but still with the same heart to serve. And we had multiple discussions on how do we encourage people to still get out and explore safely, and understanding what safely meant. And so we created all of these different experiences, like discoverable driving tours. You did one on your bike, right? And so they're still available on our website today. But how do we get people to engage in a way that they'll feel comfortable to get out and get out from there, feeling like they're stuck inside, but also at the same time trying to follow the guidelines that we were all trying to navigate, and also to alleviate fear. And so those were the out of the box ways that we could market, design, and share our stories and our assets and still get people to feel connected to community. Another program during that time was we wanted to create storytelling. At the time, it was curbside or hands-free delivery, which became big. And we worked to create video and a story that said, we're here for you. And it showed, responsible delivery. You could contact business owners and say, I'd like to buy this, this, and this. Transaction when it's done online, they would deliver the items to your door. And our community really leaned into the small businesses to ensure that they could weather this storm without having foot traffic within their brick and mortar buildings. And we also took the time to call. We rallied on one of our Zoom calls. We realized people must be afraid. And we think we know how to help them, but we want to hear from them. What do they need? And so the team, we split the county between us. We started a tracking spreadsheet. We just started calling them. How are you doing? What's your worry? And what can we do to walk alongside you? And that became some of the byproducts. We were teaching people very early on how to go live and sell things, how to leverage the hands-free delivery option. And we ended up going one step further. One of our board members at the time had said, what if we did a campaign to promote that we're going to get through this, right? That we're always better together. And so we did these T-shirts. We sold them at cost. Man, we sold a lot of T-shirts. You could go online. You could order a Better Together T-shirt. We would package it. If you lived in the county, we hand delivered it. Like we set it outside your door. I'd have to go back and look. I think we delivered like 300 T-shirts in Wabash County. But it was important for the Visit Wabash County team and board to make sure that they knew that we still cared and that we weren't just going to hole up and go away, right? And those were just a few of the things that we leaned into. And then when the world said it's okay, you can go back, we ran another short video. We worked together to storyboard that and what that could look like and started sharing that story that we're open and that it's okay.
Yeah, I would say that leadership, right, is not really easy, but leadership's easy when you can walk away after an event or something and say, man, that worked out, that went really well, right? But both from your board in that moment about all of the credit, right, you give to not asking you about who can we live without,
Never.
what does this look like, right? And being prepared for that moment and the unknown, and then you leading your team throughout that, right? That's leadership's hard, right? So if we have listeners that are listening or younger listeners as they're coming up, getting to hear you talk about this is really important, and getting to listen to your leadership values that have shown up in your team members, I think is something else valuable that we don't want to miss. Where does that come from? So let's maybe go back into early Christine Flohr, or how you've developed those skills over time, I'm guessing, right, to bring us to where you're at today.
I've had, through my adult life, I've had a lot of different opportunities, believe it or not, and I've worked in different segments of the employment markets throughout my early years. And I had really good leaders that I learned from. I had leaders that I learned things maybe that I would do differently throughout my life. But I think when you're, almost a half a century old, right? Almost 50, you start to recognize that I am here. I have no talents. When I look at all the talents that you both have, now hear me out. I'm not super athletic.
Me neither.
And I don't have I don't have a college degree. I want people to know that. How did I learn to do these things? Hindsight for me, I really truly believe they were gifts from God. Like, I give that credit to God. I really do. And also then for the care that has been poured into mentor and develop me into the executive director that I am. You both are very good at challenging me when I am worried. I'm not a risk taker. You both are very good at asking me the question, but what if? But we'll find it if. And believing in what we can accomplish. So with people like you, I don't want to miss anyone, but, off the top of my head, watching Jan Rowland as a female leader in this community and the way that she has poured into me when I was just a little baby executive director, and seeing her help transform me. Hard talks from people like Larry Hoover, who once told me I interrupt people when they're talking and I needed to stop it. He used to own Quality Electric. Michael Weibel, who's passed away, he used to tell me I don't know how to end a conversation. I just keep going. And so you hear these pieces from people who can speak truth into you, and they've shaped me into becoming self-aware. And I think if I go where it starts for me, my mother worked hard. She was a single mother. I'm one of 5. I'm number 2 in that line of succession. And my mother raised my older sister and I for many years on her own. And you talk about work ethic. I mean, there were times when we were growing up that we ate before she did, that she had one coat and we got the winter coat. And I can remember it never felt bad, but I remember she worked so hard. And she used to always say 2 things: leave it better than you found it. Well, 3 things. First, leave it better than you found it. Second, always do the next right thing. And third, there is no excuse for people being dirty or filthy. Even poor people can wash up in a bathroom. She was very tidy. And so watching her love us and work so hard to build something for us is something that resonates deep in who we are. You don't do half a job, you do it all the way. And you always make sure that whatever you're stepping into, you do it with integrity so people then can trust. If you commit to do something, you do something and you see it through. And that's resonated, I hope through Cassidy as well, as a young adult too.
If you haven't had an aha moment yet in the podcast, I appreciate you sharing just a little bit about your mother and upbringing, what she instilled in you, and those 3 values. For me, even not knowing that, right, hearing you just explain that for the first time, has been like, okay, yes, it's going to be better than we started. It's going to be extremely organized and clean.
Yeah.
And I mean, just executed at a high level, all those things. I mean, it was an aha moment. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. And, and then you watch my mother married I don't like to use the word stepdad. I guess that's the term. We now always said the only steps in our house were the ones that went upstairs. So my dad, when she married my dad, Steve, I call him dad, have him my whole life. Then my family grew, and he had a son from another marriage. And then my parents had Stephanie, who, if you don't know, podcast listeners, Stephanie Rogers, the experiences manager, is also my baby sister. And so we always say she's kind of the tie that binds those families together. And then my parents adopted my youngest sister. And so we became this village of helping take care of things. And my mom continued to work hard. My dad, he had a non-traditional job. He owned and operated his own oil wells here in Wabash County and still does. Most people don't realize that. Trust me, we were never like Dallas. If you're too young for that, Adam, you remember, We were never oil tycoons. My sister and I always tease about being oil heiresses, hard work, but both had hard working jobs. And my mom worked most of her time here at GDX or GenCorp.
So, Christine, we've talked about your little over 14 years at Visit Wabash County. Mm-hmm. You had a great job prior to that. Mm-hmm. What, at the United Fund, if I remember right?
Yeah.
When you get an opportunity, you've been asked to basically apply for the position at Visit Wabash County. What's that decision like, and what are you looking at, both personally and professionally, in making that decision? Is it the impact that you're able to make? What plays into that decision for you?
I believe one of those talents a natural ability that I have is to build things. I feel like I can evaluate a project, an organization, and look for ways to streamline, make it more efficient. And so I want to make sure that when I'm entertaining something, the next thing that I might be asked or to be considered for is, can I make a difference? And again, going back to what my mom said, and can I leave it better than I found it? Not that it was bad when I got in any of those roles, not the case at all, but what can we do to then make it even stronger, even brighter, even more sustainable? How do we adapt it to serve the most good,
Because when I think back to what Visit Wabash County was in those days, looking at it now, it almost feels like that was a step backwards for you, but the potential was greater. Like the ceiling was higher, right? It was it kind of had constraints on the organization physically and what they had done to market, but the county as a whole had a lot of potential. And I just wondered, did you see that then in what this county actually has? Or, I mean, how is that like natural progression and growth happened?
When I was at Wabash County United Fund, and was asked to apply for that role when it became available, and had never been a fund developer in my whole life. Like, that was a first for me. And so we had, in that time, I mean, we had really successful United Fund campaigns and close to raising, $400,000-$500,000 in a year. And it's a great organization that does a lot of good. And if you're not familiar with Wabash County United Fund and Kelly Dale and her work, she is excellent. She is just continuing to keep that organization strong and serving a lot of nonprofits. For me at the time, other than the key fundraising events that we would do twice a year, it didn't have the opportunity to diversify the type of revenue that we could get in. At the time, the structure was set up as kind of a payroll employee contribution campaign. And I don't want to say it felt redundant, but it felt a little more limited. In looking at the opportunities at the time for the tourism office, I could see that the leadership who had been there for decades was Trula Frank. She had married toward the end of her life, and she's also passed. I could see where it was ready for the next, at the time I was young enough to be called the next generation, to step in and look at that organization. And Trula had done a great job of answering the phone and being great step-on guides for those motor coach buses. But I knew that there was more to it. And so I saw the exciting opportunities. And at that time, the leadership was so supportive of leaning into what could be next, the board of directors, that I was really excited and honored to be invited to be considered and then to receive the position. And the board of directors, I know, took a lot of time looking to fill that role. And I'm grateful. They took a risk on me.
When I look back at your role at Honeywell and then at United Fund and now at Visit Wabash County, the common theme for me is they're all about relationships. Mm-hmm. And that shines through, whether it's the relationships you have with your board members, community partners, and your staff, or when you were at Honeywell, you're building relationships with clients that were trusting you for their wedding or a special moment, right? Mm-hmm. And then the same thing when you're in United Fund. Share with our listeners about relationships and the impact and how you go about really finding that commonality with other people.
That is the core of when we have staff meetings at Visit Wabash County, that's at the core of what we do is relationships. So if you come and you participate in one of our experiences or our events, we don't look at the runners or the cyclists or the bluegrass attendees as dollars and cents. We look at them as prospect relationships, that we see them as people, and we're grateful they chose us. I learned from Todd Minnick when I worked at the Honeywell Center. He always said you're selling the second experience when they're there for the first, right? So you cabbage onto those things and you recognize that it's the relationship, that connection to people, that not only can make our organization operate effectively and differently and in a memorable way, but that's what we see weaving through this podcast. That's what we see weaving through Wabash County. It's not just the team that works at Visit Wabash County. Throw a stone and you're going to hit another person in this community that realizes the value of relationship. And relationship is what I believe we're designed to have, a real, true, authentic relationship. And I also think that that's what we hold on to when we're working on plans and programs. And we've had multiple people sit right in this chair and talk about, we're not always going to agree. We've said that. We can still be in a relationship and not agree on everything. You and I don't always agree on everything. You and I don't always agree on everything. But at the end of the day, we then choose to stand alongside each other and work toward the greater good. And the work part is key. Nobody can do it for us. And that's at Visit Wabash County. That's at JM Reynolds Oil. That's at the Community Foundation of Wabash County. Nobody can do that work for us in this community and in this county. We have to show up. Keywords from you. We've got to do it. And then so not only do we have to show up and do our work, but we also have to make sure that we're leaning into those relationships and supporting one another. It's a choice. Every day we get to choose what kind of person we show up to be in this community.
Man, That was a mic drop moment. I'm glad you didn't drop the mic. We may struggle getting it back on to the microphone stand.
We'd have to have
but
Adam help us figure it out. We wouldn't.
yeah, it's above my pay grade.
Yeah.
I just drive. Interesting. Wow. That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Christine. I've got a few kind of hot questions coming your way here in a second, but just didn't know if there was anything else, Adam, you had before we start to wrap up here.
Well, I reached out on our socials and asked our listeners to ask a few questions. And I thought the question that really stood out to me was from a friend of yours, what the biggest accomplishment, most proud accomplishment that you've had. And I want to break that down into both personally and then professionally. And I know that's going to be a really tough question, but you have done a tremendous amount at Visit Wabash County over the last 14 and a half years. What program or idea or just anything, concept, has really stands out to you as being that important?
The catalyst would be probably building out the Welcome Center. That was not easy. Michael Beecham told me no twice when I approached him about moving Visit Wabash County and building out a Welcome Center. But I think then that set that investment, that brick and mortar location, so we were visible and could start really building relationships in a new way. And that's, again, at the hand of the board of directors. I mean, we had a lot of meetings looking at prospect locations and vehicular traffic counts and partnerships. And that building and its design is a gift from Michael Beecham, 100%, and the design talents of Andy DeLauder, and just a vision from a board to trust that we could take 600 square feet and almost, quadruple it, I'm not good with math, and to where we are today, and know that we could do something amazing. So I would say in regard to, there's so many, and they're not my accomplishments, they're really the team's, but the Welcome Center. I'm so grateful for that space.
Personally?
I would say trusting in faith. I know that's newer for me in the last, 5 or 6 years, really understanding what that can mean for a person. And also, I don't like to call Cassidy my accomplishment, but she is most certainly Brooks and I's greatest joy. Your heart's living outside of your body, and to watch her live her purpose in life and to do it so well. And Cassidy is stubborn, and she is brilliant, and she is dedicated and passionate and caring. And she is, what we do. This is what we're doing, what we do for. All of us want our children, our future children, to see what we've given, and hopefully they replicate that wherever they are. So personally, I think that my greatest accomplishment is Cassidy, and hoping that she continues to feel and know that everything that Brooks and I did on this earth was so that we could set her up to be in a world that was better than the way we found it.
Parenting is not easy, and there's no one, follow this playbook and it affects every child the same. What you guys have raised in Cassidy is independent, strong, smart.
Thank you.
But what my dad told me a long time ago, that one of the hardest things you'll do in life is to raise your kids to be able to leave the nest. And Cassidy has chosen that. She went away to IU, is that correct?
Yeah.
And now she's worked in a couple different communities, and now she lives out of state for a while. And I know that's got to be tough as a parent, but that you've given her all the tools, and she's making a big impact where she's at now, teaching young kids. So
thank you for that.
Congratulations on that accomplishment.
I know she's a loyal listener, Cassie, so it's probably hard to hear, but I hope you listen to that part, and also that we know you'll be back eventually. It's just a matter of time till you come back, and we'll be grateful for all the experiences that you can bring back to our community. Also, not to put it out there in the universe, but the reason why we haven't really dug too deep or asked a lot of questions about Brooks is because we may or may not have Brooks coming into the podcast studio in the future.
I think it's going to happen.
So not to give anything away for our listeners, but make sure to tune in on that.
Yes.
Christine, I just have two quick questions. Okay. You've mentioned the phrase, leave it better than you found it. And that was one of the 3 rules your mom instilled in you that now you've been able to instill in your daughter. And then all of the work that you've done to leave, whether it's just, if we look small, with all the great work that you've done at Visit Wabash County, but the ripple effects that's had in our community, not to be too grim and futuristic, but when you're no longer in our community, right, and you grow and you pass away after many, many years, what is the one thing that you want people to talk about and say about Christine Flohr in Wabash County, as you've worked so hard through your career and will continue to do so for the next several decades, but to leave Wabash County in a better place than it was?
What do you think? What do I hope people will say about me? Oh, I hope by then I'm old news and there is someone else that is stepping into. And I hope it's that those generations that we're pouring into, your generation. I know we're close to the same age, but definitely your generation, Alex, and your boys and your future kids and Cassidy when she comes back. I hope by then anything that we have done together continues to be built upon, and I don't need to be remembered for anything other than I hope people remembered that my heart was to follow the Lord and to love people right where they are. That's what I want people to remember. And when I die, I'm going to share. When I die, I just want Jesus to say, "Well done, good and faithful servant," and let me in. But that is the truth. That is the truth.
I would say for me, I think it's a Maya Angelou quote that talks about people will remember how you make them feel. Mm-hmm. And I would say that obviously with your faith as a driver in you, right? And you feel that when I'm with you, but just you are so intentional in every interaction and whether it's working on a project, everyday conversation, whatever it is, right? That I think that's what I know and always think about when I think of you. But
she has another quote, Maya Angelou does, that says, "When you know better, do better." And that's also key, right? When we know better, we do better.
Yeah, I was going to say on the same lines that people will think about Christine and that what she did and what she accomplished, she did it because she truly cared.
I do care.
Yeah.
I do care. It'll choke me up. I care so much.
Less serious question. This is probably hard for you to answer given that you're all about driving traffic across the county. I'm not going to ask you what your favorite place to eat is if you have one opportunity to go out in Wabash County. But of all of the experiences that Visit Wabash County does put on, what is your favorite experience for you as a consumer that you like the most or excited about the most that Visit Wabash County has to offer?
That's a good question. There are actually two.
We have those occasionally on the podcast, not often. But.
Winner. Bluegrass at Hopewell feels like the team is hosting this community barbecue in this backyard, right out in this rural area. And my team can it's a lot of work till the bands take the stage, and it just becomes this great feeling of where we're actually able to attend and enjoy the event and network with all these incredible people. The other is there's this moment at the start of Dam to Dam every year that I've never participated in Dam to Dam. If you want to know a secret about me, I've only ridden a bike on the river trail once, better at the organization side. But there's this moment when you start to see 800 cyclists in one space and you hear them talk about your community or their experience here or the people here. That brings me another level of joy, not only to myself, but reiterates to my team that what we do matters and can create such an incredible impact. And we just don't always know it, right?
It's a great tagline. What we do matters, and we just don't always know it. It is a great way to leave. So, Christine, thank you for everything you've shared. There's a lot of wisdom packed into this episode that I hope all of our listeners appreciate. I know the way that we do, but this podcast, again, is one of those decisions and choices where you all leaned in. And so we're grateful for you and your leadership to see that vision. And then Adam as well, to see you and I when we came to Adam, and then all of the stakeholders who've made this possible. And so we're grateful, as always, for the Lisa Gilman Investment Fund, the Sandra Kunkel Trust, Mark and Amy Ford, Paperworks Industries, the City of Wabash, the Community Foundation of Wabash County, and Visit Wabash County. Until next time, I'm Alex Downard.
I'm Christine Flohr.
I'm Adam Stakman.
And this is the Thrive in Wabash County podcast.